excited to speak on the bill today. A few things I listened to in the last couple of minutes, Madam Speaker. I heard the words misinformation and disinformation. And in our own society, it seems like if there's information that's put out there by the woke society, then that's good information. But if somebody has a difference of opinion, that's horrible information. I want to give you an example from my own province of New Brunswick where this is prevalent. As a provincial MLA from 2010 till just last summer, we had two major projects in New Brunswick. One was the Energy East pipeline, and the other was the natural gas project, which was also in my province. Now, at the time, natural gas didn't get widespread support, and it ended badly, and we never developed the industry. With the Energy East pipeline, we couldn't get support from the province of Quebec at the time, for whatever reason, and that didn't happen either. So if you look at today, at what's happening around the world, it would be misinformation to tell Canadians, or New Brunswickers rather, that those two projects were not worthy. Because if you see what's happening in the world today, and you look at the energy sector around the world, New Brunswick would be well positioned to have its gas industry and very well positioned to have a pipeline sent from Alberta to both New Brunswick and Montreal. These would have been very good projects, but you're not going to hear that from the Liberal Party of Canada. You're also not going to hear it from the Green Party of Canada. So we can't have it both ways. So what you see here today, Madam Speaker, if we talk about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that's really about what's at stake. Now, although I'm not a lawyer, I will speak about this in general terms where I think it's understandable. Freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression. Freedom of the press and other media of communication. Section 2B of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees us all the liberty to express ourselves without reserve and without coercion from the state. That is a core principle of our constitutional heritage in this country. Although it was embedded in the Charter in 1982 from the Prime Minister's own father, it goes back hundreds of years through the English liberty, this parliamentary system transmitted from one generation to the next. I'm going to give you a quote from Sir Winston Churchill. "Everyone is in favor of free speech. Hardly a day passes without its being extolled, but some people's idea of it is that they are free to say what they like. But if anyone else says anything back, that is an outrage." And we see that in this country. Now, I understand the precedent of a war and how that's the biggest issue of our time. But in this country, it's all too often where the woke community can go out and spew what they like and drive it down everybody's throat and then try to compare us to American politicians, which couldn't be any further from the truth. But see, that is an example of misinformation and disinformation, just as another example. This bill seeks to take away that right and those freedoms, Madam Speaker. Do not take my word for it. I can quote directly from one of the least two former commissioners of the regulatory body that would be empowered under this bill to control internet content. Peter Menzies described the bill as an assault on freedom of expression. Another former CRTC member explained that it would allow political appointees to determine what we see and what we say on the internet. Senator and great writer David Adams Richards from my home community of Miramichi said something along this level. It was like a knife through the heart of the freedom of expression we enjoy in this country. These are some quality names, some very well-known individuals who have some very strong points on this. I'm splitting my time with the Member of Parliament from Haldimand, Norfolk. I forgot to mention that, Madam Speaker. There is a lot we do not know about this bill. First, because numerous of its amendments were voted before they were even made public to the committee. The Liberals want a series of bureaucrats, unnamed, unelected, and unknown, to decide what Canadian content is heard and what is not heard. I'll give you an example. Mainstream media. Mainstream Canadian media often runs American political content without Canadian content, gives a strangely outward and seriously biased opinion on the content, and feeds it to the Canadian public without any local content, but including their opinion each and every time. And yet, we pay for this as Canadian taxpayers. Long gone are the days when media put out the facts and let the public decide what was right, what was wrong, what was liberal, what was conservative. The public used to determine these things on our own accord, Madam Speaker. And I think as a country, we got along better then as a people. And I think we need to somehow get back to that. But another example is community association in a Canadian neighborhood telling us about local food drives. It's in a Canadian neighborhood, it has a Canadian author, it has a Canadian story, it's a Canadian initiative in a Canadian city, and it's read almost exclusively by Canadian readers. Yet it would not be considered, presumably, Canadian content, therefore it would be demoted, Madam Speaker. That is just the daily pedestrian content we get online. What about the more conscientious stuff? The government is going to decide what kinds of political views are Canadian. Of course, endorsing the Prime Minister's left-wing agenda and his ideology will be a prerequisite of Canadiana. We can be sure of that. Liberal Party members have effectively been saying for generations that they and only they represent Canadian values. Therefore, only the values they espouse would be considered Canadian for the purpose of this act alone. So, Madam Speaker, not only can the Liberals not tell us what content would be acceptable and what would not, but they cannot tell us who would be subjected to the bill. Originally, they had explicit exemption for users, the everyday Joe and Jane who post stuff online. It's called user-generated content. The Justice Department said, don't worry, the bill won't affect any of them because there's a very specific exemption that excludes them. However, the Liberals showed up at committee, and all of a sudden, and just like that, here we go again, Madam Speaker. Another example of a government that can't be trusted. So the issue here, the Liberal government has introduced Bill C-11, formerly Bill C-10. Last year, the Liberals passed Bill C-10 in the House of Commons without allowing a full debate at the Heritage Committee to address many outstanding concerns from experts and parliamentarians on how this legislation affects Canadian rights and freedoms on the internet. Canada's Conservatives support creating a level playing field between large foreign streaming services and Canadian broadcasters while protecting the individual rights and freedoms of all Canadians. Canada is home to many world-class writers, actors, composers, musicians, artists, and creators. Creators need rules which don't hold back their ability to be Canadian and global successes. Earlier, I gave an example of Senator David Adams-Richards, well-renowned writer from the Miramichi River. This bill is a near copy of the Liberals' deeply flawed Bill C-10 that fails to address the serious concerns raised by experts and Canadians. While the government claims there is now an exemption for user-generated content, the legislation allows the CRTC to regulate any content that generates revenue directly. 1 minute. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The people need to be free to see anything that's available so they can make their own decisions for themselves. That's the liberty we have in this country on what's important, what's right, what's wrong, what's just and unjust, and what the facts are. Now more than ever, Madam Speaker, Canadians need to know that their freedom is their own and that it doesn't belong to politicians, bureaucrats, and judges, and that it belongs to each of us. And on this founding principle, the people can feel free, Madam Speaker, and freedom is paramount. It's the one liberty we all want and need, and each of us are prepared to fight for it, especially the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The